Hey guys, what's going on? This is the first episode of Jamming with Jamie. Sorry for the earphones, guys. The microphone on my phone doesn't actually work properly. Today we're going to be talking about Dean Kasagi, okay? Some of you might not know him. He's a millionaire who pretty much started his journey at about 20. Um, so I'm just going to get straight into it because that's what he does, and I'm just going to take a page out of his book, alright? So the first thing I like that he does is he pre-frames his speech by saying, I don't claim to know it all, and I don't want to come across as someone who comes in and starts teaching straight away. Okay? He does this so that people lower their egos and they're more receptive and more teachable to what he's going to say. Alright? Another thing he does is he creates engagement and relatability through sharing stories of shared acquaintances, right? So he'll tell like a funny story, which maintains the engagement, about someone they both know, right? Um, and in the process, he'll also edify them. So it's always important to always be talking highly about your upline, your downline too, but mainly your upline so that they kind of like follow them better, you know? Um, One device that he does is, you know how we're always told in school to ask like rhetorical questions? He actually asks non-rhetorical questions. So I think the reason he does this is to make it more of a conversation and less of a lecture, because that's a very like prevalent theme in his like conversation is that he's not for lectures. He's for conversations. He's for practical application, not so much the theory. Um, so he talks about a specific thing he does. It's called trial ballooning. Pretty much, it's when you get into a conversation with like your friend, someone you're like traveling around with or something, and you'll be like, "Yeah, I really liked Gold Coast, but I think Sydney's just different for me, you know." And I really enjoyed speaking in Melbourne, but again, Sydney is just like the place for me. And so what he's doing is he's baiting people into eavesdropping around him, and so they'll basically ask the question. They'll be like, "Oh, what are you speaking about?" And what he's done there, he's actually created posture. So by having a secret that people want to know about, he's created that I've got a secret, I know you want to know it, kind of like a power dynamic almost. And so they'll ask, and he'll start his QI, his quality invitation. All right. Um, so another thing that he talks about is actually thought leadership. One of the quotes he mentions is "Good thoughts produce good fruit." Right. I like that quote, so I'm kind of gonna extend on his analogy. So if good thoughts are like the soil, the nutrients are going to go up through the roots into the trunk and into the leaves, and eventually it'll create good fruit. So indirectly, good thoughts are going to lead to a difference in mindset, which is going to lead to a difference in action, and habits form from that. And eventually, it creates good fruit, right? So back to the theory versus practical. So he basically talks about how everyone is certified, everyone has the theory, the information, but very few people are actually qualified. Very few people have applied this information and had it tested through trial. And he really stresses the importance of having it tested through trial and not just receiving the information, and then turning around and teaching it back, right? Because at the end of the day, all that matters is what we can apply. It doesn't matter what we know, it matters what's able to be applied and what we can apply. Another thing he talks about is employees versus empire builders. So an employee will start at the ground level, and they'll just start kissing and slowly building their way up, right? And it'll get like narrower and harder, and there's more competition towards the top. But empire builders, they still start at the bottom, but they'll actually build down, and they'll start to leverage all the credibility above them as they go down. And in doing this, they kind of build something that's it's going to last longer, basically, because it's more sustainable. Another thing he talks about is actually naive ignorance and how it can change the world. So naive ignorance is basically not having all the facts, not just going, not just having to know everything before you do anything, right? It's about just being told to do something and being like, "Yep, all right, I'll do it. I'll figure it out on the way," right? And as a leader, you're always gonna have to take chances. And when you start playing to not lose, that's when you've already lost, right? Another thing he talks about is focusing on retention is actually counterproductive for retention, which it's counterintuitive as well, because you'd think that if you're focusing on keeping your team together, they'd stay together. But actually bringing on new people and expanding actually leverages the egos of the people that have already been there into learning, because they have to fake like they know all the stuff and they've been like doing all the right stuff. You know what I mean? And he actually talks about that on the next CD, but that's for next episode. I'll get into that later. He also talks about being sometimes you're the least knowledgeable of what you're capable of. And I find that quite interesting. And it's very true. Because the example he uses is a tiger raised in captivity. A tiger raised in captivity will never know that it's a tiger. If it's just around humans, sorry. It'll never know it's a tiger because it's never seen a wild animal. It's never seen another tiger. But within about 15 to 30 seconds of seeing another wild animal, regardless of when it happens, the example he used was a family adopts a tiger and it's raised with the family. It thinks it's one of the humans, right? And it's only 8 years later that it actually meets another tiger, another wild animal. And within about 15 seconds, it knows that it's a tiger and it's never going to be the same. And humans are the same, right? So if you're around people that are just lazy, not really doing much every day, you will become one of them. It's inevitable. But as soon as you get around people of action, of people that are doing something, moving with purpose, you'll become one of them, or you'll know that you're not one of them. And that'll happen very quickly. And you will never be the same afterwards, right? Another thing he talks about is goal setting. So here he's basically talking about reevaluating what you want and if you're on track to get there. Because where you end up is not defined by where you wanted to go. It's defined by what track you were on to get there. Like if I want to go to Melbourne, if I start going towards Brisbane and I'm just like, I want to go to Melbourne, I'm not going to end up in Melbourne. It's where I'm going is where I'm going to end up. Does that make sense? So basically he's telling people to reevaluate their goals, where they are, what they have, and if they're not on track, then getting on track. Another thing he talks about is an equation. It's called E plus R equals outcome, right? So E is the events of the world or your environment, same thing. R is your reaction to them, and together those equal the outcome. So most people think that you can actually control your reaction, but 96% of how you react to something is actually subconscious, right? Only 4% is conscious thought. So the actual controllable thing, which makes your outcome controllable, is your environment, your events. So, for example, he uses ice cream, right? If he has ice cream in his fridge, he knows that he's gonna go nom 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 and eat it. You know what I mean? But if he just removes that ice cream, changes his environment, he knows he can't eat it because it's not there. To wrap up, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how he talks. So he consistently uses humor, especially early on, to get across his point, keep engagement high, and also make it easier to remember his lessons, because everyone remembers a funny joke, right? He also talks with a lot of humility, and he makes sure to make no assumptions about anyone's ability or stuff. He'll even like third party it sometimes, and be like, oh no, you don't do the wrong thing. I was talking about this person that does the wrong thing. And that kind of keeps him from being like held accountable almost, but still getting across the message. Yeah, so for example, when he talks about certified versus qualified, he makes sure to say he's not minimizing on the people that are certified, the people with that theoretical information, but that he's actually maximizing on the qualified people, right? And I think it's very important to never come across like you, like you're beyond teaching, pretty much. That you know everything. He says it early on, that you know everything and you're just going to come in and start teaching straight away. Because if you come in and you have that ego, people are going to instantly have their defenses up. They're not going to be as receptive to what you're trying to teach them. And yeah, that's something he does really, really well. Anyway, guys, I had a great time. I hope you guys learned a lot. And I'll see you next week on Jamming with Jamie. See you guys.